Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Mnangagwa rigged the 2023 elections. This is a historic fact. All the election observer teams, including SADC and the AU, condemned Zimbabwe's 2023 elections as flawed and illegitimate. So that point is our starting point. And what Mnangagwa did soon after the election results were out, the 2023 election results were out, he dismissed SADC and the AU's reports and even abused them, calling them detractors. Here he is commenting soon after the 2023 elections.
Vana vakatuka Zanu PF kana ini ndonyanyisa kufara kuita zvakanaka. Ukavona vavengi vakwashi kurumbidza nekuchikanganisa. Ukavona vachiti Zanu PF yakaipa farai. You are doing great things for your country. Hongu takaita ma-elections edu kuna vamwe vaitaura zvisina musoro zvikanzi ma-election anafamba zvakanaka ndezvavo.
Let's correct that. It was not only the outsiders who said those elections were rigged. Zimbabweans themselves said it. This is typical of these tyrannical regimes. What the ordinary person says is dismissed with contempt. Here he was only referring to what SADC and the AU election observer said. As to what the ordinary Zimbabwean said, it didn't even register in his mind. This is how much people like Mnangagwa treat the ordinary people with utter contempt. But the fact still remains that Mnangagwa blatantly rigged the 2023 elections, denying the people of Zimbabwe a meaningful say in the governance of the country. And this has been going on, dating back to soon after independence. The 1980 elections themselves were not free, fair, and credible. Mugabe and these Zanu PF cronies had agreed at the Lancaster House talks that they would withdraw their freedom fighters from the field to designated assembly points during the campaign period, so that people would have the confidence of voting for whoever they wanted. But by the time Mugabe and his cronies arrived back in Zimbabwe, they had changed their mind. They did not withdraw all their operatives from the field. A number of them were left in the field, and they were given specific instructions. Their message to the populace was that if Zanu PF does not win those elections, the Bush war would continue. Many areas in Zimbabwe in the rural areas were no-go areas for other opposition, other political parties like PF SAPO or Muzorewa's ANC. The Zanu PF operatives in the field saw to it that there were no-go areas for the other opposition, for the other political parties. Of course, the people voted to end the Bush War, not knowing that they were giving up their right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country, never to get it back. Because within 3 years of Zanu PF forming the government in 1980, the regime was back on the war footing, launched the Kukurawundi. The primary purpose of the Kukurawundi, as I've said on this platform, was to make sure that the only other political party that formed a serious challenge to Zanu PF's hold on power, i.e. PF SAPO, was dissolved. The late Dr. Joshua Nkomo and his PF SAPO colleagues finally relented on that point in 1987 when they signed the Unity Accord. And that cleared the deck for the launching of the de facto one-party state that has ruled the country ever since. When the nation tried to elect opposition leaders in the hope that they would implement the democratic reforms necessary to end the Zanu PF dictatorship, Mugabe and company's reaction was brutal. The opposition leaders were abused and physically attacked. The opposition electorate was subjected to the same treatment. It was SADC who pressured Zanu PF to implement a number of electoral reforms so that the 2008 elections were to be the nearest the country has ever got to holding free, fair, and credible elections. But when the results started coming out and Zanu PF realized that they were losing the 2008 elections, Mnangagwa and Chiwenga stepped in and took over the electoral process. This is what they did.
I also know that Mugabe conceded defeat on 2008. He found Mbeki and Obasanjo to concede defeat. I hope that Thabo Mbeki and Obasanjo will one day make that public. But one of them, I won't say which one, told me that Mugabe phoned them that Saturday night and said, look, I lost the election and I concede defeat. And I know that Mugabe stuck to his guns. I was prepared to go. His wife was since bags packed to go somewhere on the following day when Mnangagwa and Chiwenga approached him and said, you stay where you are. and then they contrived the runoff, sadly with the help of South Africa. And runoff took place, very violent. 360 people were killed. The South African, I came here as part of a delegation to Cape Town to see members of the ANC. I don't want to mention names, they're my friends. I saw them, and through them, a cabinet committee subcommittee of South African cabinet was set up on the Zimbabwe issue. It was on the basis of that cabinet committee that South Africa did not recognize the runoff. And indeed, it was the basis of that committee that Thabo sent the generals to South Africa, to Zimbabwe. I met them, and I was one of the few to have read the report, because I was flying to Joburg in the company of General Romano, who was a friend. He passed away, no? That's why, yeah. And I also took people who had lost their hands in the violence to the South African embassy in Harare. And Romano broke down in tears. How can a liberation movement treat these people like that? He was a broken man. So there's no doubt at all here in South Africa as to the brutality of the regime in Harare. So it amazes me, it angers me, in fact, when I hear the nonsense coming out of people like Mbalula's mouth. They know it.
So the bottom line is the people of Zimbabwe have been subjected to sustained brutality, forcing them to give up their fundamental right to free, fair, and credible elections. It's not that the people do not know that Mnangagwa rigged the elections, but more of what can they do? That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. I think this story would be amiss if one does not mention that the GNU that was imposed by SADC on Zimbabwe 2008 to 2013 did give the country the opportunity to implement the democratic reforms that would have got the country back on a democratic footing. Unfortunately, the MDC leaders sold out. Mugabe bribed them with the trappings of high office, and they forgot about the reforms. So this left the nation still trapped with a regime, Zanu PF thugs, who believe that they have the divine right to rule the country. They have the divine right to rig elections to stay in power. So when Mnangagwa rigged the 2023 elections, to him, he was only exercising his divine right. And the people were helpless to do anything about it. What is disappointing here is, of course, that after having rigged the 2023 elections, i.e., he is illegitimate, Mnangagwa went on to demand that he should be allowed to extend his stay in office beyond the stipulated 2 term limits. This whole amendment number 3 is about extending Zanu PF, the dictatorial powers. and the nation is being forced to negotiate. This is no more than, is comparable to a situation where a thief breaks into your house and demands that he should be allowed to take whatever he wants. The thief has been stealing from you for so many years. He now believes he has got the divine right to steal. Now, when he has broken in, he can choose whatever he wants. And this whole fight to stop the amendment number 3 is no more than trying to negotiate to reduce Zanu PF dictatorial powers. It is pathetic. What I find even more amazing is that the opposition should now consider themselves champion in this fighting to stop the amendment. Here is Tendai Biti wittering about stopping the amendment.
That is to say, 2/3 in the National Assembly and 2/3 in the Senate. It must then go to a referendum, because it is a bill altering term limits in the country. The referendum is a simple process, Baba. The referendum simply asks whether you are saying yes or no. Because we are going to campaign and live in the mountains to get that no vote. There's a second problem. The Constitution then...
What I find amazing here is that Tendai Biti and his MDC friends had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms, particularly during the GNU. They failed to implement even one token reform because Mugabe bribed them. And now he's telling us he's prepared to live in the mountains, to die defending this amendment. How pathetic is that? You had the opportunity to implement the reforms, to end the dictatorship. You did nothing. Now the thief, the rogue regime is in power. You want to tell us that you are prepared to fight them to stop getting additional dictatorial powers. I think it is pathetic. The people of Zimbabwe should focus on the real big issue here. For the last 46 years, we have made the mistake of allowing Zanu PF to believe that they have the divine right to rule the country, to rig elections. And once they've rigged the elections, they've done as they damn well pleased. I think we need to reclaim our right. And as long as we allow Zanu PF to believe they have the divine right to rig the elections, this fight will never end. Whether Mnangagwa gets the amendment passed or not, it will make very little difference to the ordinary Zimbabwean. Because as long as Zanu PF still retains the power to rig elections, They will rig them. And we will still be stuck with this Zanu PF dictatorship. If he fails to push through the amendment, the only difference will be, instead of Mnangagwa as a dictator, there will be another Zanu PF dictator. Because let me rest assure you that if VP Chiwenga was to be nominated as the Zanu PF candidate for the next elections, 2028, he will rig those elections. The Zanu PF juggernaut will see to it that Chiwenga is the president. Chiwenga has already been rigging elections of Mnangagwa. The video I showed you of the Operation Mavotera Party of 2008, it was Chiwenga and Mnangagwa who orchestrated that. It was Chiwenga who orchestrated the 2017 military coup. And if you seriously believe that Chiwenga will not rig the next election, then you are naive. And as long as we have got a Zanu PF dictatorship, this country's economic and political problems will continue. We need to look at the bigger picture now. We should not be focusing on stopping Mnangagwa amending this constitution. Mnangagwa is illegitimate already. We should have focused on his illegitimacy. SADC and the AU, like I said, condemned 2023 elections. They would have gone one step further and denied Zanu PF legitimacy. They did that in 2008. They would have done it in 2023. They did not do so because Chamisa had conned millions of his supporters to participate in the flawed elections. You cannot deny that participating in a flawed election gave Zanu PF legitimacy. If 2 million Zimbabweans are happy to participate in a flawed electoral process, why should SADC step in? In any case, to what end and purpose, even if they did step in? Having a second GNU in 2023 would have accomplished nothing. Because if we have got the same people with the same mentality as we had in 2008 to 2013, no meaningful reforms will be implemented again. And at the end of the GNU, we are back to where we are. In other words, as a people, we are not yet ready for a healthy and functioning democracy. Democracy demands that the people should be educated, knowledgeable, objective, and diligent. The Zimbabwean populace, the Zimbabwean electorate, have so far failed to show that they've got any of those qualities. The overwhelming majority of Zimbabweans out there do not even have those qualities. They still have this personality cult mentality where the leaders are considered to be demigods who can do no wrong. As long as we have got an electorate with that kind of mentality, even if we were given a healthy and functioning democracy on a silver platter, we would not be able to hold on to it. We'll get it in the morning, and by evening, the dictatorship will already have started taking form. That is the truth. Thank you. Have a good night.